Welcome to Film Strip, movie reviews presented by Continuous Play Podcast. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Nick.
And this is our review of Fatal Attraction, starring Michael Douglas, Glenn Close, and Anne Archer. Directed by Adrian Lyne, released in 1987 on a budget of $14 million, grossed over $320 million worldwide. Now, the movie whose title became synonymous with the torrid love affair turned into murderous obsession. I actually have a good story about seeing this when it came out. I didn't see it in theaters. I was way too young. I think I was like 11 when this came out. But my parents saw this, and they decided that this was a good way to teach me and my older brother about the dangers of adultery. So when it came out on home video, they rented it, and they made us like leave the room, during the two really graphic sex scenes, but the rest of the time they made us watch this, and they're like, see, you got to watch who you get involved with, because the crazies are out there or whatever, which is, my parents had some interesting parenting choices for sure, but it made an impression, no doubt about that. But I've seen this movie.
You saw Jurassic Park when your parents told you need to watch this for the horrors of cloning, right?
Yeah, I was old enough at that point I could make my own choices for entertainment, but yeah, I remember seeing this. It made an impression for sure, and then I don't know, it stuck with me for a long time. A little behind the scenes, I actually wrote the plot summary that we're going to talk about here in a minute. Before I even rewatched it this time, I just remember it that well. This movie definitely leaves an impression, and I had remembered that it was nominated for a lot of awards. And it was nominated for a slate of Academy Awards, lost every one of them to either The Last Emperor or Moonstruck. Neither film I have seen. I've never seen The Last Emperor nor Moonstruck, so I guess we could talk about that some other time. But yeah, surprisingly, this one did not win a lot of awards, but it was a massive hit, as the box office shows.
That's amazing. I've heard of this movie before. This is actually the first time I've watched it. And just actually going through this movie, I can't believe how much of this has actually been it's part of pulp culture in a lot of ways. And just kind of watching this, I'm like, that's where they got that from. Funny enough, before we even started recording, I was telling you I was watching some Family Guy reruns the other day. And one of them I was watching yesterday was where it was the Fatal Attraction episode where Meg becomes dangerously obsessed with Brian, the dog. And there's actually a scene where she has his collar on and she's spinning like the tags on it and turning the lights on and off and on and off as she's listening to some like opera style music. So I'm watching this, I'm like, that's where they got that from. And like so much of that episode is actually this movie. I mean, even like the Part of You and Me and stuff.
Right. I mean, yeah, it is a part of popular culture. I think you're dead on it, and a lot of it is Glenn Close's performance. And I mean, we could talk about her and everybody here, but the thing is you've got actors here who were well known at the time. Anne Archer, I think, was probably the least known of the three at the time, but she had been around for a while. Glenn Close, of course, had done a lot of things for a number of years. Dangerous Liaisons was a massive hit, and other stuff. Of course, Michael Douglas was, of course, Kirk Douglas' son, but beyond that, he had been a producer for a number of years, and then had been a pretty staple leading man throughout the 80s. I mean, he'd done Romancing the Stone and all of that kind of stuff. He actually won an Academy Award for Wall Street, which came out the same year as this. So two big roles for him in the same year. It was a good action. I think the thing about dramas like this, the ones that last and become part of popular culture, are built on two things that work. They have to have scripts that are really smart and intelligent and move well, and they have to have actors that can deliver it and make it believable. That's what separates good ones from becoming Lifetime movies of the week and things like that, and which seem to be so cliched and stuff. But in 1987 when this came out, I mean, the torrid love affair had been in cinema for 40, 50 years at that point. That wasn't anything new.
I think ever since the beginning of cinema or any type of,
drama.
people putting on any type of drama, or talking even plays. I mean, you look at something even like William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet and stuff. I mean, it's a staple of any type of entertainment, is watching relationships, good and bad, dissolve or grow or whatever. I mean, it's part of what we are as a species. But I got to ask too, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit off air, and Michael Douglas, I mean, I guess I just don't see it. I see it like, someone like Richard Gere. I can see how women think this guy is like ruggedly attractive and stuff. I look at Michael Douglas and I'm like, he looks like someone you would go buy a Nissan from at a used car dealership. He's just, I don't get what him being this like leading man in the 80s. Maybe it's just the way people looked back then. I don't know, but it just seems like
it is like, part of the
people
time
becoming obsessed with him. It's like, okay, he's rich in this movie, but it's like, I don't know. I don't get it. And same with like Glenn Close. I'm watching this and I'm like, man, this would have been so much more, I'm not gonna say believable, but I would have been maybe a little bit more understanding of his affair with her for a day or two if it would have been someone like Sharon Stone, who, if you've ever seen Casino, can pull this off without a hitch.
Well, we'll talk about Sharon Stone and Michael Douglas next time we do Basic Instinct, so we can talk about that. I don't think movies had gone to that exactly at this point with the steamy thriller necessarily, and I credit a lot of that with Adrian Lyne and the way that the production put this together, is that they didn't want the kind of stars that just made your mouth drop open kind of people. Michael Douglas worked in so many ways because he could play the sophisticate, the city slick, wealthy, but still everyman kind of thing. I mean, Gordon Gekko is completely above everybody's league, right, in Wall Street. But there's certain scenes in there when he really plays it down, and you see that he's just a smart guy that found an angle. Michael Douglas is always one of those guys that comes across as the guy that just he's smart. He's smarter than he is tougher. If you've seen Romancing the Stone, which is like a romance novel, Indiana Jones movie with Kathleen Turner, and it's hilarious, by the way. It's a good little romp from the 80s. He's not necessarily like this, tough warrior, adventurer guy. He's just smart and he's just slick. And I think that's what Michael Douglas represents, is somebody who can talk his way out of anything. And I mean, the character he plays, Dan Gallagher's a lawyer. He talks his way in and out of almost anything. And you see that they wanted somebody that could pull that off. And I think Douglas is great for that. As far as the Glenn Close casting, I think they went opposite of type, and even she has said that she had never been cast as the sexy role. That was not her. She doesn't consider herself that. It's not, how she comes off. But they cast her in that because she could do seduction the way that they wanted this person to be able to do. The kind of person that could change their look just by the way her hair is done, her face, her eyes. Her eyes are incredibly emotive, and she understood the psychology of the character more than anything else. Ann Archer's gorgeous. So
yeah, I think that's kind of like my whole thing is like, you got a pretty good family life here, and your wife is absolutely gorgeous and stuff, especially after having 2 kids. And it's like, and then there's Glenn Close. I don't know. I just, based on my experience, if you ever see anybody with that haircut that Glenn Close is wearing in this movie, you stay away. It's never a good sign.
Yeah, I think she ruined the big frizzy cut for everyone, for sure. We should get into this though, into a plot summary, I guess, before we go any further. So let me go through this real quick. Dan Gallagher has a great life, like we've said. He's on the rise in his New York law firm. He's happily married to his wife Beth, has a loving daughter. But the temptation of a fling with a sultry book editor named Alex is too much for him to pass. So he considers it a simple passing fancy, but for Alex, everything changes. Jilted by Dan, she becomes unstable, escalating from aggressive pursuit to obsessive stalking. Dan realizes his main problem is not all just hiding his affair, but keeping Alex from himself or his family. He finally confesses to his wife, and she kicks him out of the house, and Alex picks up the daughter from school, and Beth, in a panic to find her, has a car crash where she survives but is injured. And Beth and Dan reconcile, and he goes to confront Alex at her apartment, and after a violent struggle where he nearly strangles her to death, he leaves her with a threat. Now, over the edge, Alex sneaks into the Gallagher's country home and attempts to attack Beth in the bathroom. Dan intervenes, trades blows with Alex until Beth finally shoots her, ending the nightmare once and for all. That's kind of the surface plot summary. For anybody that hasn't seen it, like you, I do think this is an age thing. I think your generation replaced Fatal Attraction with several other things. Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Basic Instinct, lots of other stuff like that. I think my generation, this was our torrid love affair gone wrong movie, as we talked about. And I think we got to start it with the way that all of this sets up. And I give Adrian Lyne, the director here, a lot of credit for knowing how to let a drama work by staying out of the way. I mean, this was written as a stage play initially and has actually been produced as one now. In years, it was actually another script for a short film that got turned into a play, and then they bought it up and made a movie out of it. And I think this movie works a lot like a play. I mean, the sets are very still. The scenery is just sort of there as a place for three walls for the actors to work in. And I like how sort of normal the Gallagher's life looks in comparison to what maybe you expect. You know, they're in New York, you're panning across, you know, the skyscape there, the famous 80s. I think every 80s movie had a shot of New York in it, I swear. You know, I mean, they all did, whether it was in New York or not. But they did, and, you know, you've got Gallagher working on his couch in his, you know, shirt and underwear. His wife's getting dressed for whatever they're doing that night, and the kids over there watching You Can't Do That on Television, which is also a grand memory of my childhood. This is the slime, and I don't know. But I like how normal everything sets up. And they really set up for you that he's kind of got it all. I mean, everything that they go through here, this first little bit, and then getting ready to go to the party that they go to, that he's really got a good thing going.
Oh, he definitely does. And I think maybe that's kind of why this beginning stuff really doesn't work for me as well, because he has a really, really good life. It's not like they're showing that he's got some issues with his wife, that maybe they've grown apart over the years, or he's become so career focused and she's not on board with that. And it's kind of like some type of divide between them. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're a pretty good couple. And between like his lifestyle and the fact that, you know, they're living in one of the most expensive places in the world you can live in and are living very well there, that when we start actually getting into him and Glenn Close's character, that to me, it's just like he came off almost as just as bad as really the worst character in the first act of this movie, where he's kind of like, dude, you kind of deserving. I mean, you know this movie's going to go downhill as far as the events that are going to happen, and it's kind of like you're asking for it. And so, I mean, is that kind of how when you watch it, is that how you took it, or was it more understandable on your part?
No, I think that's exactly how we're supposed to take it. It's also one of the things that I've always sort of looked at this movie is, does Dan get away with too much? You know, and I think what we're to watch is kind of the fall and, you know, somewhat rebirth of Dan Gallagher here as a person, is that he's certainly got everything you could possibly want. He's got a great job. He's got a great career. Certainly it takes up a lot of his time. He's still working at home, you know, obsessed lawyer, you know, bit in there, but a lot of them do. But, you know, he seems to balance it well. I mean, he's got a relationship with his kid, and his wife seems to be totally on board with this. I mean, she's fine with this life that they have. And when they go to the party, which is, I mean, he's like a corporate style attorney. We should say he's not a criminal attorney. I mean, he does like litigation for contracts and things along those lines. And one of his big clients is a book publisher, and they're going to some, I don't forget what it's like, samurai self-help book, you know, publishing party. I've never been to a publishing party, Nick. Maybe they're this, you know, rocking. This seemed like I thought this would be low key, you know, brie and affairs, but apparently they're not. And so, I mean, they go to this big party or whatever, and you get this sense that, like, man, this guy is like moving up in the world, and he's going places, but he's not like young and hungry. He's middle-aged. I mean, I think they're all supposed to be playing like mid to late 30s here or whatever. All these actors are 40 or above, you know, and I don't know that they all don't look it either. I mean, it's kind of funny to look at them, but they're not yuppies necessarily, but they're kind of playing that role still. And it's different for me to watch Michael Douglas play this, because he always plays the guy who's like the boss or the in control guy. And at this point, like, he's still reporting to people. Like, he's got people above him, and you see him kind of pander to him. I think Herman Munster makes an appearance later as the boss, and, you know, things like that. And I like seeing that in him, but I do think it gives you this real reason to not like him. I think the funny thing is, and Glenn Close has always said she never considered her character the villain in the show, and I agree with her. I think Dan's the villain because he's an asshole for everything that he does in this movie. I mean, he's a real jerk for 2/3 of it, and it's hard to get on board with him and watch him. And that was one of the things that was a major criticism of it when it came out, was that this guy is a complete idiot, to do the things that he does. And, I mean, how does he get turned away by her? When we first meet Glenn Close, man, that look that they gave her with the hair all frizzed out and like pulled back, and it's like I don't know, it's like her head is coming through her hair or something. It's really weird, and it just looks, he's sitting there talking with his buddy, Stuart Pankin, the actor, and another lawyer, and they're chit-chatting, and he like gives her a look like, hello, hubba hubba, and I'm like, yeah, and the look she gives him is like, please, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe that was something of the 80s New York woman. I wasn't really, again, I was like 11, so I was barely paying attention to that kind of thing. I didn't get it either. I've never understood what he would see in her versus Anne Archer, but maybe that's the idea, is that he sees something that's so totally opposite of what she is, that's why he is intrigued by her. And I'm talking about that first little meeting they have when he's at the bar getting a drink and she's sitting there smoking a cigarette, and they're just kind of talking about, I hate it when guys come on to me like that, etc.
Yeah, that's the one thing in this movie that I had a real hard time grasping onto, was just like, as we discussed earlier, just Glenn Close and this, like, she has some type of seduction aspect about her that like men can't, get away from. And I'm just thinking, like I said, it would have been so much better if it would have been someone who looked like Sharon Stone did in the late 80s, or even if they, casted someone who's a little bit more exotic, where it was like, he's not used to being around this, where it was something where he just got totally pulled in, where I'm seeing her and I'm like, man, she looks like a first grade teacher. It's like,
well,
like,
that's a scary looking first grade teacher.
Yeah. I mean, she's a good actress. She's probably a very, very nice woman, but she just kind of comes off like, man, she played a really good like witch in like the Salem witch trials.
She does come off kind of witchy, like she is sort of luring him in that way. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be, is that she's the forbidden fruit or something. But whatever it is, something about that is memorable with him, because the next day, and this is kind of what happens, his wife and kid go away for the weekend, going to visit her family in the countryside of New York, which this is a funny thing to mention too, because I've driven through the state of New York before. And if you think of New York as New York City, you really, like, New York is a big country. Like it's a lot of farmland and beautiful place to go and check out. Not in the winter necessarily, but unless you're just into mounds of snow. But it's, beautiful place. She's going to the country for the weekend to see her folks, and they're looking at a house and all this kind of stuff. And he stays behind, and he's got to go to a meeting. And all that he's doing is to make sure that this book that they're going to publish, that's about somebody having an affair with a politician, that that they can back it up in court. To like, yeah, there's proof that the author isn't basing it on Senator whoever, and she's the agent in between, for the author and the thing. And the way she carries herself in that room, she, everybody else looks like they're, halfway hungover and just sort of hanging around on a Saturday in the office, right? And she walks in and she just left the club, and she's, got her hair all done, and she's talking real tough, and she's laying it on him thick at that point too. He's eating something, gets a little bit over on his face, and she's like, pointing at him and doing cute. And I think it's that conversation they have at dinner when it's raining and they can't get a cab. They're sitting in that restaurant where she really reels him in. Because you see what she basically says to him is, she asks him, can you be discreet? And the whole bit is like, you want to do this? Because I'm not going to tell. Like she's totally like a spider luring him in her web. And I think that's how they play it, and I think that's how Glenn Close plays it too, is that she can't believe she's getting a guy like this either, because I think Dan is way better class than most of the dudes she probably hooks up with.
Yeah, definitely. At this point, I'm sure you've seen the movie Big, but it's really kind of reminding me of the main female. Her name's escaping me at this moment. But
Elizabeth Perkins,
the way she is in that movie, where it seems like she is kind of a guy hopper, where she's doing, she's single for a reason, because she knows that it's going to further her career, that it's going to be where she can, just kind of latch on to whoever's going to help her out at that moment. And I think that's how it's kind of coming off, where it's like, she's talking about being discreet and stuff, that it's like, well, she's done this before, and
Right.
she knows that it's, no strings attached, that she's going to do this, and hopefully, she's going to have fun. And then she's also going to be able to basically help out her job in a way. Because, if you're working with someone and, she's able to do that, there's not going to be much, the relationship or what she's going to try to get out of it is going to be much more easier when something like that happens. Or at least that's how I see it, and how I feel like her intentions are, is that she's trying to basically, try to get a little bit closer into this guy's life so business is a little bit easier. I mean, being in sales, being that my position, it's like it's so much easier to actually do business with people that you know on a personal level, as opposed to someone that you first meet at the first time. I mean, that's why when you're in sales, it's always like, you never start off with what you're there to sell. It's always like you try to get to know the person. You try to get to know who their wife is, or who their kids are, or what kind of sports teams that they're in, or where they, approximately live. So that way you can kind of, break the ice with them and try to be able to get to know them a little bit easier. Because then when you're doing business a little bit later and you're coming down to numbers and everything like that, it's much more easier to talk to someone as opposed to just talking with them at the beginning of that. So that's how I kind of saw her, as like, well, she's kind of a businesswoman who understands the glass ceiling, area that she's in, and that this is her way of breaking through it.
No, I think
she's going to use her body, she's going to use her sexuality, and she's going to be able to basically break through this guy and be able to make any type of business relationship that they have pretty easy from that point on. So that's how I kind of took it at first. But as obviously as this kind of starts going on, as you realize that maybe, I'm going to ask you this: has she done this before? Do you think that she is kind of one that maybe sleeps around a little bit, or was this the first time? Because my question is like, was this like an evolving thing with her, where maybe she's kind of was going from guy to guy, and the older that she gets, the more she realizes that, maybe there is something to being in a relationship, and she's now at that point where she really wants it? Or is this like her first time doing this, and this is when the crazy comes out?
I do not take her as the kind of woman that is sleeping her way up. I think this is a good opportunity for her, again, because I do think this is the kind of guy that is way classier than what she normally can attract. We see later, like, she takes him to a club and it's like seedy, awful place, it's not the kind of place Dan Gallagher hangs out, so she's probably not attracting these kind of dudes. She's, older now at this point, and so most of the men are married or moved on, and she says something later about, married guys, always leave or something like that. She's had affairs before. I do agree with that, but I think the thing that cannot be lost in this is that this woman is mentally unstable, and Glenn Close did a lot of research on people that were psychotics and all sorts of mental disorders, and talked to therapists and stuff, and say, to really get the character arc of this person down. And they all, agreed with her and told her that, yeah, this would be something that an obsessive person that was damaged essentially would go through. Is then she finally finds this guy. She thinks this, just like him, this is going to be a quick turn, but something's different. And I don't know, they go through the love scenes, which are really, at this point, they're parodied. I mean, they have sex in the sink with the water running. They have sex in an elevator, and, all kinds of, you've seen it done a million times now at this point, but at the time,
I could just see people trying to like reenact this and like
oh,
in
God,
their lives,
yeah.
and just being like, this doesn't work.
I think there are a lot. Yeah, there are a couple of good joke videos out of College Humor is one of them, where they do like sex in the movies if you tried it in real life, and it's all like, no, that hurts, stop doing that, and that's how most of that kind of stuff works. But beyond that, I think something in the midst of this changes for both of them. One, Dan realizes, and the thing that he's attracted to is that, and why he stays around for the next round of it, is that she is so different and wild compared to his normal life. And not that he's got a bad life, but that's a real change. I mean, you don't find women that'll just, blow you on an elevator every day. And so he's into that for the
at least not in our part of the country, Jay.
No, I don't think in any part of the country.
They'd rather take you to church.
I just don't. Well, I think they'd rather take you to the mall or something. But I mean, we live in different times. But even in the 80s, that was it seems so out of bounds for this kind of, buttoned up conservative guy, right? Alex P. Keaton, basically.
I mean, we're right in the midst of the Reagan era right now.
Right. I mean, yeah, we're in the Reagan
like being a little bit more seedy.
Yeah, this is
a
very
bit more risque.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a president that's, doing this in the Oval Office.
Yeah, we got a president that at this time is, drinking a warm glass of milk at 7:30 and turning in by 7:45.
Yeah, Reagan's done at this point. Yeah, so I mean, we're in the middle of all of that. It's a different time and era, but that's what brings him in. And I think Alex really falls for him because what he represents to her is way more stability than she even has in her own life. I mean, look at her apartment when we think about it. It's stark. Everything's white. The sheets are white. The walls are white. Everything is like whitewashed so that it can look really clean. But what you really notice about it is how barren it is. I mean, the kitchen has very little in it. There's a very small little table for two, next to a window. There's an exercise bike by a bed, which is on the floor basically. And then a very small bathroom. It's a small place. It's not, and it's not that she's, hurting for money necessarily or whatever. She apparently does really well at what she does, but it's a very barren place. There's nothing there that she couldn't just drop and leave and go somewhere else. So it's almost like a woman who's looking for something so much better than what she has so she can go and be a part of it. Because you contrast that with where the Gallaghers live. Everything is colorful. They have a lot of stuff, and it's also kind of cluttered, like a family's house is. There's stuff all over the place. They've got stuff everywhere, but it looks really nice and it's colorful and it's pretty. And then Alex's place is really just stark. There's nothing there, and that to me says a lot about the characters as much as anything and what they say. But
I think too that the white motif that they're going on there is very much how you vision almost like a psychiatric ward.
Exactly.
The white walls, the white everything is just, very sterile, there's not any personality there because it can't be. It's got to be a very, like I said, just a very sterile, open environment. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to go for here is when you look at his life, as you said, kind of cluttered, but still kind of nice. I mean, that is his life. He has a cluttered, nice life where you can tell is a very sterile style life. And I think that's kind of also the thing is she's looking for some type of color in her life in a way that she wants to change who she is. And I think just even with these two getting together is that they're both seeing something that's different.
Yeah.
And where, he's seeing this, person who is, different than what his wife is and kind of, exotic in a different type of way. And where she's seeing someone where it's he's got his stuff together in a way and he's got this life that I want. And I think as this affair goes on, just goes on for 2 days. And I think it's just, he quickly realizes that, this isn't anything I really want. It's kind of nice to, not window shop and maybe going in and try on a few things where
I think that's exactly what he's doing. He's taking advantage of the fact that his wife and kid are gone for the weekend. And this comes out and he's getting ready to leave on Sunday, I guess it is, to go back to his place or whatever. And she loses her mind at him. I mean, she kicks him and curses at him, and he's like, okay, and so he's like, well, that was weird. And then the coup de grace of that is when she's like, I'm sorry, let's be friends or whatever. He's like, oh, it's okay, and she's crying. He's like, oh, baby, it's all right. And I'm like, man, you're such a-hole. I'm like, man, you really want Dan Gallagher to get shanked at that point, right?
Here's my advice to him at this point. It's if you don't want it to go on anymore, make sure you fart a lot, do a lot of really gross things, and then she's gonna want you out of there.
Yeah, well, clearly he was maybe thinking this could be my piece on the side or something like that. I don't know, but she starts touching me. He's like, why are your hands all wet? And what she realizes is she has cut her wrist. Now she hasn't cut her wrist in the serious, I'm ready to, she's into the T, the straight up the arm, but she's done it in the suicide attempt.
Cry for attention.
Well, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And it is, I mean, you talk about something that changes the atmosphere of the movie almost immediately. Because up to this point, this has been a steamy drama. All right. And you're like, man, this guy is such an a-hole to do this to his wife and kid, all this stuff. And then you see this, and you're like, holy cow, this is a horror movie. And the music plays like that. The director pans it that way. I mean, this comes off like a not Shakespeare, like this comes off like a Hitchcock moment.
Well, you know what this is turning off as right now is Frankenstein. Is that he's now created Frankenstein's monster.
Oh wow, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you really look at like how that story's based about as far as, the guy's doing some pretty unethical things. I mean,
Yeah.
he's doing some unethically unmoral things right now, and he's created this monster, and it's now going to be a part of his life that,
Yeah, I don't even think he realizes how big the monster is at this point.
yeah, and I think it's just going to be something where now it's going to be I mean, you really look at, how Frankenstein and a lot of those plot points, it's very similar to this movie in a way.
I hadn't thought about it like that. That's an excellent analogy, but yeah, that's a good call, because that's exactly how this goes. I mean, you're right. I mean, he tends to her wounds or whatever, but he doesn't take her to the doctor. And I'm like, see, he's so worried about getting caught. Like, he don't want anything weird to happen, so he makes sure she's okay. I'm like, what do you do? Super glue her wrists back together or something? I don't know. But apparently
It works good on cuts. I know that for a fact.
I don't know. Maybe the dude just realized, well, she didn't get a vein or anything. I don't know. But anyway, he gets her all taped and bandaged up or whatever and calms her down. And he's like, okay, can you stay, are you going to go to the doctor? You're going to be okay. Okay. I'll talk to you later. So he leaves. And what has helped this is that his wife has called on Sunday and said, hey, I'm staying an extra day. And he's like, okay, cool. So he's taking the family dog over there even. And I'm like, man, the dog would totally rat you out. If it could talk, you'd be glad you don't have one of those dogs that can talk, or whatever. Cause that dog would be like, so he's got to be wondering, where am I? So
you're saying good thing this dog's not Brian Griffin. So
he looks like Brian Griffin though. That's the funny thing. But yeah,
well, Brian Griffin is a lab, and I think it's like looks like a lab golden retriever mix.
Yeah, something like that. So, but anyway, he's definitely loyal to owner, who feeds him spaghetti. By the way, that ended badly later that day for people who don't have dogs and don't realize what feeding them stuff like that does. But anyway, he gets to go back to his life now at this point. And the thing is that, well, the daughter, of course, is, had a good time with the grandparents, and she loves rabbits now, because as small children do, they go from animal to animal or whatever. And they
catch on to the most impractical animals.
Yes, exactly right. And that is a very impractical pet.
A pony, a rabbit, a ferret. It's like, just stick to the cat, the dog, or a fish.
But this is where we start to see the downturn of Alex. And there's something that happens in that day with them on Sunday that's important, because it reveals itself later. Dan and her are running along, and they're playing with the dog, and he acts like he has a heart attack and drops, and so she runs over there and is like, are you okay? And I think like that's a couples thing. Like, you just act all of a sudden like you're not there and see what the other person does just to freak them out. Well, she gets seriously pissed at him. Like, my father died of a heart attack, you asshole. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, and he has to play all cool. And then she's like, whatever, he's still alive. Only to find out later, no, he actually did die of a heart attack. And it apparently happened when she was young. And so that's part of her mental scarring and things like that. And you start to see her begin to unravel a little bit, because for her, this is something that she's latching onto him. She likes having dinner with him. They listen to Madame Butterfly, the opera, and they're just into this, and they're connecting on so many different levels. But he's just like, whatever. I mean, this is more than just, a hooker, I guess, but it's a thing. And you asked me earlier, is this the first time she's done this? Well, do you think this is the first time he's done this?
That's a good question. I'd like to think so, but I guess that's an unanswered question, and something that you're going to probably bring in your own life experience into this to maybe understand if he has or not. I like to think it is. I like to think that, as we discussed, that, these guys are supposed to be kind of in their late 30s, and that this is the first time I think we're, in his career where he's starting to become a little bit more successful, where I think before he was probably just kind of, he's successful in a way that they were comfortable, but I think this is the first time where he's starting to really take it off. So I think in a way, in his psychology, where maybe he's seeing, he's probably been around many lawyers who have had women on the side, who have had these other second lives and stuff, because they can afford to do that. And I think in a way, maybe he's just trying to dabble in that for a little bit. It was just, a lot of circumstances kind of combining at once. So I like to think it is his first time.
I think so too, but I think he's thought about it. I kind of feel like Dan has played this in his mind a lot of times and just fantasized, maybe not about her necessarily, but just in general. And now he's trying to sort of play through it. And for the most part, up until the part where she, feigns like she's going to kill herself or something like that, and, and has lost her mind at him in front of him like that. I think it's gone about like his fantasy would go, is that we had a good time. See you later. See you around, the office, whatever. Maybe we'll hook up again. He's leaving it open, but he's also making it pretty clear. I got to go back home. I got to go back to my life.
Especially later when the stalking starts going on, where I think he's probably one of these guys who's like, hey, I'm able to, like you see like your friends going out and drinking and, and they drive, they always get home, safe. But the one time that you do it, you get pulled over. And I think that's kind of how what's going on now is where he's probably seen a lot of this stuff going on and been, can indirectly been a part of it. But I think in a way that it's like his first time doing it, and he made the biggest mistake he could.
He picked the worst thing out of the gate, and I think that's again why my parents showed this to us. Is you have to be very, very careful as to who you're with and all this kind of stuff. And I think even my mom may have made some point about the end, like, you got to even be careful who you marry. See, she shot that woman. You never know. And I'm like, holy cow! I don't think that was the lesson in this movie. But
let's be honest. I think every guy in a way has always been like, it'd be kind of fun to hook up with the one that's a little crazy.
Well, I think every guy has dated the girl that was just a little on the edge, maybe, let's be gentle here and say that. And you did, because when it was good, right? But
it was exciting.
But when it got bad, it's why you go on a roller coaster. It's why you watch a horror movie, a good one at least, right? I mean, it's because you want that scare, that excitement, like you say. And I think that's exactly right. I think Dan's very happy in his life. He's very, very pleased. But he just wanted a little excitement, and he got that. But now that excitement keeps coming back to him, and keeps calling him, and showing up at his office, and won't leave him alone. And he can't get rid of her. Like he's tried nice, he's tried being kind of stern, and we even see one time on the phone, he's like, "Look, I'm sorry if I misled you in any way, but this cannot go on anymore. Thank you."
See, and I think that right there is a telling sign that this is his first time.
Yeah,
because he doesn't know what to do. And you have to imagine that a guy who's probably had a few different affairs throughout his career is that he would have a better understanding of how to deal with someone who's a little bit more clingy. Because I doubt that if someone who's done this 3, 4, 5 times, is able to, would have picked up some tricks along the way.
Well, maybe so, but it could also be that he's never dealt with someone who's this unhinged too. I mean, do you think there's got to be different levels of it, that not every single one of them is going to be like, oh, okay, cool, I'll see you around. You think there's going to be some that are going to be a little bit more clingier? I mean, I'm not just saying this in a female basically. Males are like this as well, that there's different people with how they grasp on the stuff. So you think in a way that if this was like his 6th time doing it, that he would have a little bit more confidence, because right now it just shows that he doesn't know how to handle this. That I think
he's trying to be nice, he's trying to be a little bit stern, and he just looks confused. And I think what would have really helped is his fat lawyer friend. My God, that guy's huge.
Yeah. Who, by the way, in later life lost a ton of weight. Looks great now, so good for him.
but I think in a way, I think it would have been nice to have a little bit of exposition here, where maybe he kind of confides in him a little bit more and is talking about this, and maybe like even have a few drop lines that maybe he's done this with his wife. And I mean, he kind of makes jokes about it at a dinner table later about his wife and some kids, and maybe just kind of asking him for advice, and maybe he even brings it out.
He does.
That's the thing. I think it a little bit more though, where he says, where the guy's like, dude, I never expected this from you. You know what I mean? You've had this, you've had women throw themselves at you before, and you actually did it this time. He's like, something like that, where he's giving a little bit more advice, where he's just like, you're handling this wrong. You got to shut it off. I've dealt with this before. You got to be stern, maybe even be a little threatening with it, but you got to end it because you don't want to ruin what you have at home.
I think he does that, though. Let's take a step back for a second here. As the stalking increases or whatever, the Gallaghers get ready to, they're buying the house, they're getting ready to move and all this stuff. And of course, Alex keeps calling him, bugging the stew out of him, and he has his phone changed and all this kind of mess going on. Well, the coup de grace of all of that is he agrees to meet with her at the train station the next I guess it's the next evening or whatever, on the way home, the commute, and she tells him she's pregnant. And his reaction to that, and this, at the time in 1987, this was controversial. is he's like, well, it's okay. I'll take care of it. I'll pay for the abortion. And she's like, what makes you think I want that? Like, they had this whole conversation about it right there. And that was just something you didn't talk about in movies. You know, at this time in life, you just didn't do it. You know, I mean, this wasn't long after Reagan had actually said the word AIDS and, you know, the HIV and all that kind of stuff. So we were coming around to accepting this in our popular culture.
This is before If These Walls Could Talk.
Exactly. Yeah, this is way before, you know, a lot of the things that we talk about now. And I mean, that's on a television show. It's on a sitcom now, you know, necessarily, but this was a big deal.
This is before Judd Apatow was going, I think you should get a abortion.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, this is before it became a joke. And I don't know. That scene, though, is so neat, the way that him and her go at each other like this. And it's one of the first times when they really get to do that. There's one a little bit later, too, and we'll talk about that one in the apartment because it's fabulous. But she is pretty adamant that, like, no, we're going to have this kid together, and you can just leave your wife and just come with me. That's fine. Bring your daughter, too. That's okay. I mean, he's like, are you out of your mind? You know? And goes to the point of, like, she shows up at the apartment acting like she wants to buy it from him so she can get closer to him again because he's ignoring her and stuff. I mean, it's getting deep.
It is. And I think at that moment where they're taking their walk, I mean, at first she shows up at his office and, you know, they kind of, you know, she invites him over to Madame Butterfly and he kind of, you know, tells her to go away. And then when they then have this talk where she's telling him that she's pregnant, this is where I think just maybe probably being a male, I go from not liking the guy to really like feeling bad for him because, like I said, I'm taking this as like the first time he's done this and it's just going completely wrong for him in every way. I mean, this is like worst possible case scenario in every way. And it's like, you feel bad for him so much because not only is, you know, having an affair and whatever like that, it's going to ruin his marriage. But with his kids being young, this is the stuff that's going through my mind. It's like, you know, if they end up getting a divorce, you know, they're so young that they're just going to think that, you know, what comes up later is just going to be normal for them after a while. But the fact that there could be a possible another child entering this, and it's like everything's going to get destroyed. Everything that he has built up, his life, his marriage is going to end. I mean, and his career is probably end up going to go down about this as well, because, you know, if you, let's say you get a divorce, you'd have to imagine, okay, he's going to move on. He's probably still going to do this. But when you're getting like this psychotic woman who's going to have a kid, it's like his whole life is going to be unraveling. And I think it's kind of hitting him at this point, like, oh my God. So I start really kind of feeling for him at this point where I'm like, oh shit. And I think his reaction is natural. I think in a way that I think it's, you know, they don't want to talk about abortion and woman's right and everything like that. I think his reaction is very normal where it's like, we gotta stop this, you know?
Right. He's still trying to wipe it all away. And she is like, I don't know why you keep trying to erase this from your life. I'm a part of your life and now part of you is growing inside of me, which is such a haunting way she delivers that. And then later on, after she shows up,
it's very horror-like the way she says it.
It is. Like, and the horror showdown scene happens, not the big fight at the end. It's the one in the middle that I mean, this was Glenn Close's Oscar reel and how she lost to freaking Cher. I will never understand. The scene where he goes after she's come over to the apartment and all that stuff and says to her, you got to stop this. You're sick. I don't know what your deal is, but you got to let this go or whatever. And she lays into him. It's like, I'm not going to be ignored, Dan. I mean, that's the line from this movie that got, you know, repeated and redone over and over again. And I love how she says it because her voice goes into this higher pitch and you can tell like she's on the verge of tears, but she's on the verge of screaming at him too. And it's, I will not be ignored. And that's exactly what he wants. And that is his nightmare come to life. It's when we're supposed to go from turning on Dan Gallagher to actually, like you've said, getting a little bit on his side. Like, okay, he clearly did not sign up for any of this and he has no grasp on what he's dealing with. And that's when he goes to his friend and they're having that talk in between the law library stacks there at the office, you can tell. And he tells him, it's like, you do family law. And I wish they had a little bit more of that because his friend obviously is like a divorce lawyer and has done this stuff. And he's like, what kind of case does this woman have on me? What can I do? And he's like, well, she didn't have a real good one on you, but this ain't good. And he gives him that look like, I can't believe you did this. I think it's all done subtly. What you're wanting in exposition, I see it come out in the performance there. I think it's there is that we've established these two guys have been friends for a long time. Maybe they went to law school together and they've been at this firm together, and they have a shorthand between each other. And he went to him, though, was like, I don't need you to judge me right now. I need you to give me some legal advice because I don't know what to do with this crazy woman. And that's exactly what's happening. Look, she steps the game up big time after this. She throws acid on his car. And I'm like, where does one obtain acid to go throw it on a car? That was the one part of this that I just never understood. I'm like, if she had cut all 4 of his tires or something, like that would have made more sense, I think, than acid on the car. That was weird. But
yeah, it was. Yeah. It's weird, and I want to state this. I'm not on his side. I am not on his side the entire movie. I sympathize with him. I sympathize with the plight he's going through, but I'm not on his side. I mean, very much going back to like Frankenstein is you're never on Dr. Frankenstein's side. You understand that he made a mistake and that now that mistake is following him around. And that, the only way that he's going to get rid of this is he has to fully confront this mistake. But I'm not on his side. I'm on his wife's side. I'm on his kid's side. I'm feeling for them, and I hope the best for them at this point. Because like I said, I've never seen this movie before where if she ends up, they end up killing each other, I'd be totally fine with that because I'm like, and that's how I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to be.
That's how Shakespeare would have done it. Yeah,
yeah, and I thought, like I said, that was going to be a complete allegory for Frankenstein, where he would have to sacrifice himself to get rid of her and to save, basically, his family. Even though in Frankenstein, obviously, he doesn't save the woman he loves. But, anyways, yeah, I mean, it's just when they're getting into this law thing and everything like that. Even though the guy's saying, like it's not good, I'm thinking like, no, dude, you're totally fucked.
He really is. I mean, he really is screwed bad. And you get that not only from the acid in the car, the tape she leaves him, probably the next best performance by Glenn Close in this, is whatever recording booth they jammed her in to record this little audio tape that she leaves Dan for him to listen to in his rental car on the way back, while she is, by the way, following him to his country house so she can figure out where that is. He's listening to her go on this diatribe against him about, you think you can do this? I mean, she does everything to him in this. She eviscerates him. I mean, she accuses him of being homosexual, which is clearly her just being angry and outrageous. And then she goes at him about like you and your perfect little freaking family, and you just don't understand that you've got responsibilities here, and you're going to have to do something about them, and I'm not going to just take it. And the way she's doing it is she sounds like somebody who's been on like a coke binge or something for days and is coming off of it or something. She's so unhinged at that point. And he is like, the way he's looking in the mirror and driving and just rubbing his face. I sympathize with him too. I'm not on his side, but I'm like, holy cow, man. I would not know what to do if Psycho Lady laid all this on me either. I mean, he doesn't have any idea what to do. And you see what he tries to do. He goes home. He got the pet rabbit at that point for the daughter, and they play with the rabbit or whatever. The wife and kid go to bed, and he goes back upstairs to his little library now in his study, and he's listening to this tape again, and he gets so engrossed in it, he doesn't even hear his wife walking up behind him. And he's so still trying to compartmentalize all of this while he's trying to lead this other life. And it's just bad. I mean, it's getting real bad, and it only gets worse by that next thing. And Glenn Close says she's taking more guff for this than anything else she ever did. She didn't even really do it. It's they go away for the day, come back, and Pet Rabbit is of course not there. And where is it? It's boiling on the freaking stove. I'm like, now that was a horror movie.
Something like that was going to happen, especially when the rabbit got brought up. I'm like, there's got to be a reason for this rabbit to be in here. But
check off rabbit.
The kind of though, like I do like your analogy though of being like on a, someone who's on a coke binge and then she's all suddenly now coming off of it, or, even just like a major hangover. Her high so far has been this, this hope, this desire that his life now will become hers. And that by, it had little ups and downs. And I think now it's where she's crashing down and she's afraid of losing that high. And she's completely losing her mind. And I really think that, that tape recording and now like the actions of what, killing this rabbit she's completely crazy. And she's trying to grasp onto any little thing, and all these like lunatic style behaviors that she's doing is just, in a way, she doesn't know anything else. It's just like she's just grasping at this point. I mean, it's someone who, someone who's, if you've ever seen someone just completely lose it and just some of the crazy stuff that they'll say and the crazy actions and everything, that's exactly what she is right now. She's at her wit's end. And I think in a way, though, they're upping a lot of the stuff that she's doing for the audience to get more on Michael Douglas's side. Because I think, it's so easy to be kind of like how we are right now, where we're like, we just sympathize with him. I think they want you to be more on his side. And I think that's why they start upping what she's doing, because it's going from stalking, phone calls, hanging up, to acid, and now killing an animal. And to me, it's just like, even like killing the rabbit is like, girl, what's your end game with this? Do you think that, you're going to like, and I think maybe in a way she's trying to scare him into getting back with her.
I think she is holding on. I don't think she's completely off the rails yet. That happens next. I think she's holding on to the last little bit of her sanity here, and I think that she's trying to scare him to death to leave his wife, come back to her and all this kind of stuff, and then it'll all be happily ever after. I mean, she's completely irrational at this point. But what turns it on her, finally, is when he's staring out the door into the rain, and, the wife has put the daughter to bed, and he's like, we got to have a talk. And I was like, that is never a good way to start a conversation with your wife, ever.
Oh, but it is fun to say that every once in a while, just to get them kind of crazy. Like, hey, we need to really have a talk tonight. And
oh my God, I don't know who you're married to, but I would never say that to my wife.
Oh, I do it all the time. I do that. Or I used to actually be like, we can have a talk. Where do you want to go to dinner tomorrow?
Yeah, you take them to do like the Jerry Maguire. So, but anyway,
you gotta play little games like that. It's like throwing cold water over the top of the shower.
We all have our ways of keeping the spark involved. I have mine, but I know some buttons you don't push. But anyway, what he does here is he confesses to Beth. He just tells her everything. He just tells her, and it comes out because she guesses some of it, but he admits to it. It's like, yeah, I had an affair with her. Yeah, I did that. He never admits that she's pregnant. That never comes out, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But he admits to her everything, and I love how he picks up the phone and calls Alex and says, the thing you've been holding over me all this time. I mean, that's the one thing she's always had is like, I'll tell your wife. I will tell your wife, which is his biggest fear. It's like, my wife, you tell my wife, I'll kill you, all this stuff. And he's finally like, it's all over. I told her. She knows everything. He's like, it's done, and
this is so remote. If you ever watch The Sopranos, The Sopranos did this plot a couple times with just like the crazy stalker. I'm going to tell your wife.
Well, it's a great plot though. I mean, think about it. It's a great way to keep tension up is when you're trying to keep something for someone and then they finally know. Well, think of all the tension that was on Breaking Bad between Walter and Skyler for all the years she didn't know what he was doing, and he finally just told her, and it was.
It's a very good way to add tension to any story. Yeah. Is having two partners and just one of them having a secret, and the whole like when are they going to find out? Because they're going to find out eventually, and you knew the scene was coming. Is like she had to have find out, and I actually think she took it a lot better than I thought.
I will tell you now, this is when I realized that the movie wants you to be on Beth's side completely. And this is where they set Beth up as this strong woman who, while she's a family woman, she's not a career woman like Alex. She's a stay-at-home mom and all this kind of stuff. But she's not dumb, and she's smart, and she can go toe-to-toe with her husband too. And I love the resolve in Ann Archer's face when Dan says, why don't you just talk to her, and just hands the phone to her, and she just stands up, like she gathers herself, rubs her hands in her pants, gathers herself, stands up straight, walks over there, and just calmly picks up the phone and says, if you ever come near me or my family again, I'll kill you, and hangs the phone up. And I'm like, holy shit. What a resolved woman at that point. And I love that line.
It's resolved, it's strong, but I also think in a way it's someone who's at fight or flight response, because I think she's now, putting two together that rabbit was probably her. And I think
she knows. I think
she knows. And I'm just saying that it's, if you ever got into, altercation or sometimes and some, you know what I mean? Where it's like, also you get your adrenaline going and you're just like become like this like badass in a way and just like, come at me in a way. And then look like a few days later, you're like, maybe that wasn't the best idea because this person probably could come and do something.
See, and that's the thing, though. I think that's exactly what flips Alex's switch is now she no longer has any leverage on Dan. at all. And this other woman has threatened her. So this almost becomes primal in a way. It's like if Frankenstein had another monster at home or something. Well, I guess it is Frankenstein's girlfriend, right? It's his
Bride of Frankenstein.
No. It's Dr. Frankenstein's Victor's fiance. I can't remember the character's name.
Yeah,
right
she got
now.
her heart cut out.
Right, yeah, because the monster kills, so yeah, it kills. So,
but that's what I'm thinking up into this point. I mean, I keep on bringing up Frankenstein and stuff like that. As I'm like, she's gonna kill her. She's gonna kill her.
Well,
I mean,
and I expected that too.
Like, tragedy.
I think that's what they thought of. But I love how that's not what happens at all. What Alex does instead is she picks up the daughter from school, Ellen, the little girl, picks her up from school and like takes her out for a fun day or whatever. Oh, I'm taking care of you while mommy and daddy are busy doing something or whatever. And of course, Beth is like losing her mind. And you got a kid. I mean, you ever show up and your kid's not at school? I cannot imagine the craziness that would ensue. I remember my parents telling me about my brother not getting off the bus at the right stop once when he was a little kid, and he was just riding the bus all over, Tennessee somewhere or whatever, and they were like looking everywhere for him. And I can only imagine how frantic you get.
Oh, it's happened to me once. And real short story is we were at the local state fair, and we had like our whole family there, like brother-in-law's sister was there, her boyfriend was there, and my brother-in-law's sister's boyfriend was playing with Chase, really good guy with Chase, and we were kind of walking around these like kiosks, kind of like flea fair or flea market type thing there, and I thought that he had him still, but then when I saw the rest of them, Chase was not there, and it's just how it happens to you, where it's like in a split second you go into that flight or flight response because your adrenaline goes. And you're obviously in that fight stage, because I remember running around this flea market, and I'm a pretty big guy, and I'm just running into people looking for him, just like smashing shoulders into people. Luckily, he was only like, maybe about 50 feet away from us. But yeah, when that stuff happens, I mean, it's just your heart sinks, and it's almost like an out of body experience. So seeing like, knowing that that's something that's happening to her, and it's like, it's very relatable. And I couldn't imagine though being in that situation, because that's a step above, because that there's someone out there who is crazy that wants to do stuff to your family. And you're realizing at this point that this person probably has your child.
See, I don't even know that she knows that though. I think at this point, I think
she has an idea. I think she has kind of an idea, because really, what else could it be at this point? I mean,
that's a good point.
Some crazy other person. Possibility there, but you gotta go with what's you going through your mind. She's got to be thinking like, did this woman come and get her, or come and get him? Did what's that's got to be going through her mind. And yeah, I mean, to me, that's got to be probably out of her. That's probably the most scariest thing, that even later in the movie with the knife, this right here is probably the scariest moment that can happen to a parent or to a person.
Think about it. I mean, she has a wreck or whatever. She winds up in the hospital, and I love how when Dan rolls into the hospital, I mean, he's running down the hall or whatever, his daughter meets him. And I love the like uber cold reception he gets from his in-laws. So now he knows they know too, Yeah,
the look that her father gives him.
Oh, I know.
Like, she told him everything.
Yeah, like they know now, and it's like, I mean, he just doesn't even know what to say. He's like, Ron, or whatever, or Howard, he just doesn't even know what to say. And
that's
can
the
he
thing
say?
too, is now this whole affair now is affected every part of his family, because
right.
I mean, you having in-laws, if that ever happened with you guys, probably your in-laws would never look at you or talk to you in the same way that they did before.
Oh, no, and how could they? I mean, it's a complete broken trust, right? That's the idea, and it's just, it totally breaks all that down. And this is fresh still. Remember, he tells Beth this the next day this happens. So, I mean, this is all like just happening in, a span of a few days here. And he finally gets her home. All he had
to do was go back to the hotel room and just rent the freaking skin flick. That's all he had to do.
He could have just gone home and played with the dog. But you know what? If he hadn't had a faulty umbrella, none of this happens. But anyway, because it was the bad umbrella standing in the rain for a cab.
Stuff like that though had to be going through his mind at this point.
He's got to be going like, if I had just said no, if I had just not gone to dinner with her, if I had just lied and said, no, I'm a terrible lawyer, I'm not discreet, if I had just realized you're kind of scary and I'm not going to do this right now, I don't know. But you know, you do that. You make a mistake and then you go back and try to figure out the one little point or whatever. And the truth of the matter is, though, is that he had left that door open in his mind and in his life for so long that, and like I say, I don't think he's ever done this, but I think he's thought about it a lot and enough that he had left it open too long. And when you do that, it sneaks in, and when it finally you go for it, it's terrible. It's the wrong time. The door closes on your hand, whatever. And now he can't explain any more of this. And at this point, all he's worried about is just trying to get his wife home. She's got like a broken arm, and her face is cut up a little bit, but she's okay. So he gets her home, and he's trying to be nice with her and stuff like that. But before she leaves the hospital, we get the big like horror movie showdown. He blows into Alex's apartment, and I will give Michael Douglas and Glenn Close an enormous amount of credit for being able to physically go at each other in what is one of the most realistic fights I've ever seen between people. I mean, so much of these things seem so choreographed and they're stunt driven and stuff. This is like messy and nasty, and stuff gets broken and thrown everywhere, and she claws him. And I mean, they have a good minute and a half where I totally believe he's about to choke her to death on the ground there. I mean, it is violent.
Totally. And I mean, and again, Sopranos did this a few times. They
ripped it off.
I'm not going to say they ripped it off. I think it was just, they saw something that was a good scene and something that was probably relatable to what that show was doing. And it was like, yeah, we're going to homage this in a way. And yeah, the fights, I'm watching it though, and I'm like, dude, she's got to weigh like 110 pounds, dude. Come on. But then I realize I'm like, he probably weighs 150. So
yeah, but the other thing is she's also crazy. Like, she's completely unhinged. And I think that's good, though. You make a good point. But he's
unhinged at this point, too. I mean, you can see it. He's got the crazy eyes going on.
He's got a big advantage over her, but she holds her weight with him. And I think that's what makes this interesting, is how do you stage a fight between a man and a woman where the man clearly has a size advantage on her?
Well,
and make it believable. Yeah,
it's a lot of it has to do with the fact, like I said, it's a cluttered apartment. There's so many obstacles in the way, and she knows the area, and he's a little bit more bigger and lumbering. That's
you make an observation there, and I was wondering if you caught it. Remember how we talked about that apartment at the beginning? It was very stark. It was institutional. You made a great call with that, by the way. Notice how it's not that way anymore now. That it's like, it's cluttered, it's messy, it's messed up. There's stuff in the way. It's because she's totally unhinged. She's not keeping that regimen that sort of kept her together, anymore, because she's, out of her mind at this point and over the moon about this guy. And I think that plays out completely.
Her priorities have changed at this point.
Oh, completely. Her priorities are killing rabbits and stealing children. I mean, good grief. She's a witch at this point.
It's every good Saturday at Regiment, I tell you.
But they go at each other, and he just stops, and then they set up a great thing here. He picks up this knife, and she comes at him with a knife, actually, like this. You think it's over, and then all of a sudden she comes at him with a knife, and he stops her and lays it down on the counter, and she eyes it and looks at him, and she gets this weird look in her eye, and I'm like, what's going to happen now? They're setting something up, right? And what they set up is what is now known as the ending of this film, where she shows up at the house. And you talk about it like a great horror movie end scene, is her in the bathroom sort of cutting herself on the leg while she's talking to Ann Archer and just going off on her like, you stupid selfish bitch, I'm gonna kill you. I'm like, man, this woman is completely nuts at this point. Like, she's gone. And that is so freaky and so scary. It's one of the most scary things in the film.
Yeah, and even back to the apartment attack between those two, is I actually thought he was going to kill her at that point. I really thought that it was going to be, I thought this was the climax of the movie. I thought that he was going to kill her, and it was either going to go one of two ways. It was either going to be him trying to get, his fat lawyer friend to try to help him clean this up, cover this up somehow, or it was going to be that he ends up going to prison for murder and the whole thing. And that's the two ways it was going. I didn't think he was going to let her live at that point, especially when he had his hands around her throat. It looked like, he was going to do it until her eyes go bloodshot and they roll into the back of her head. And yeah, it's just, I also want to bring up too is, one of the other little subplots during this movie is him going to the police. and that he's complained to the police saying he wanted to get a restraining order, and the cops, he didn't tell him about the affair, but the cop kind of figured out that, yeah, you're having an affair with this woman and you need to just fess up to this. But after that kid gets kidnapped, how freaking pathetic these police officers are. I mean, they know that this woman had taken this child at this point and known that he had made a complaint against her in the past. And they just, oh yeah, we're going to go send someone over there. I mean, it just seemed like they were just kind of like, just kind of sitting on their hands. And then when it gets to the point where this woman shows up at their house and does this, I'm like, this guy's a fucking lawyer. I'm like, he's going to sue the shit out of that police department for just not doing what their job's supposed to do. But like I say, they're not going to have the sequel to this where he's suing them. But that's a thought that's going through my mind, especially when she's up there. I'm like, the freaking cops, man. I'm like, God, they're never anywhere when you need them. I mean, it's just crazy. But yeah, when she's up there though in the bathroom, when she's getting ready to take a bath, he brings her home and everything, and like he's downstairs and he's making her some tea, and all of a sudden she's about to get in the bathtub and she wipes off the steam off the window, and Candyman's behind her at this point.
Yeah, but I did have a Candyman moment there. I'm like, oh, that's where that came from. Maybe probably not. But we need to talk about something here, though. Do you know there's an alternate ending to this, right?
Yeah. Did you want to get into what happened?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into that before they do that, because it leads into what you're talking about is the natural way this would go. The alternate ending is that Alex commits suicide with that knife, and it looks like Dan has killed her at that point. And the only way he gets off is that you see Beth finding the tape, and on the tape she basically says, I'm going to kill myself and frame you for it. Not in so many words, but pretty much says that. She runs out of the house, and that's going to get him free. But Glenn Close argued.
Did she kill herself? Did she kill herself?
She killed herself in her apartment. Like after he left there, there's that scene where she's looking at that knife and she gets that evil grin on her face. That's supposed to set up what she does in the bathroom that we'll talk about in a second. But what it really was setting up was they shot that months later, like 3 or 4 months after they had shot the movie. What happens is she turns on Madame Butterfly, leaves the door open in her apartment, and goes to the bathroom, and holding that knife where, her prints won't get on it, but his will, she slits her own throat and then drops to the bathroom floor dead. And they find her, and of course they find, his prints all over everything, and they figure out, he killed her, and they come and arrest him at his house the next day, and his wife finds the tape, and that's how he gets free. Test audiences hated it. So the studio said, you got to go back and redo the ending, and what you've got to do, and the audiences said, the wife has got to have some role in this. You got to let his wife win somehow. So that's how they come up.
The wife is, like I said, she's the one that everybody's on the side of. I'm not going to say she's the hero of the story, but she's the one that everybody's with. And I think that it was a good call. I mean, everybody complains, a lot of times about producers or studios putting their hands in projects and not letting the director's full vision come to. But these people aren't dumb. I mean, they understand what works with movies and the way a 3-act structure should be. And sometimes, sometimes you got to take a step out of the woods step out of the trees to be able to see the, the forest.
No, I think
it was a good call. It was a good call.
Glenn Close argued
that ending.
Yeah, Glenn Close.
I would have thought.
You can watch it on YouTube if you want. I watched it actually after we watched this with my wife, and she's like, that was stupid. That other ending is way better. And the thing is that Glenn Close is right about this, and she argued this, is that Alex committing suicide is the logical, actual progression of where this person would go. That would be her next step, is that now that she has nothing left, in this, she would just kill herself, and then that would be it. The fact that she frames him for the murder and it doesn't work is whatever. But that's almost like how you end a book, That's not how you end a movie. And we needed something satisfying at the end of this movie, because so much of this movie is very not satisfying. I mean, not that it's not good. It's just that it's so hard to grapple with, and it's unsettling. What I think
they did, though, is when they told him to rewrite the ending, I really think they probably gave him the book Red Dragon. Have you ever seen seen the movie or read the book? Is kind of how that all ends, is that he ends up the Tooth Fairy character, and that ends up showing up at the detective's house at the end, and it's very, very similar to that. I mean, almost down to a T as far as what they do, but it makes sense. I wouldn't buy her killing herself, because I just think that so far she's been so proactive in all her actions that I don't think that she would do something that would defeat herself in a way, because doing that would just be the last, it just, to me, I wouldn't buy it with her. I'd figured that, she's going to go out, she's going to want to take him out, or she's going to want to take the wife out, or she's going to do something completely desperate like that. I just, with like killing the rabbit and, acid on the car and showing up there, and especially after the fight, I think that, it's going to be, she's going to want to end up, doing something drastic in the end, almost in a crazy way too. And I love the way too she's in the bathroom with that knife too, and she's just kind of like going back and forth with it, and like she's cutting into her leg, because at that point, she's not feeling anything. She's just numb. And I think that's just a great way of expressing that she's just completely gone. She's not a person at this point. She's just a shell.
Yeah, she is. And I disagree slightly. I think self-destruction is the arc of the Alex character. The fact that when she goes off, she takes other people with her is also makes sense. And especially like from a Hollywood point of view, and I think that's what Glenn Close ultimately resolved herself to, was like, well, but in movie world, this woman would self-destruct and she would take out other people with her. And who's she going to take out? She's going to take out her competition. Because at this point, she's never seen Beth as anything but just the other woman until she picked up the phone and told her, if you come near my family again, I'll kill you. And she's like, okay, really? Well, we'll see about that. So she goes near her family and then she nearly gets killed. And then the fact that she's alive and dances with her, he's like, oh, no, this won't do. I've just got to go kill you straight, and then I'll just take him back with me. She's totally off of her rocker at this point, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, you see some of the stuff in the news, too. I mean, where there'll be someone who attacks another person or something just out of, like, something very similar to this thing. There was a story in the news, it was about 10 years ago, where I think some woman got like acid thrown in her face based on an affair. It's just, you do see that a lot, where it's like, it's not always going to be someone who's just going to completely self-destruct.
People attack each other at political rallies now. I mean, shoot, it doesn't take anything. People go off on you in the McDonald's, food line now. So, I mean, it's crazy.
But I think her self-destruction, though, is like, she's going to self-destruct, where she's going to take out as many as she can with herself.
Oh, yeah, completely. And that's the idea. And I love how it's all set up, the tension there of the Beth is running, and while she's, going off on Beth here, and Dan has no idea what's going on because he's got tea on to boil, so he can't hear anything upstairs. And as soon as, they attack each other, as soon as he pulls that teapot off, he hears the struggle and runs up there to intervene. And
that house needs some work, man. If that water just goes on the floor like that and it's going right through the ceiling, there's some serious issues with that house.
The first thing he's got to do is go, man, we got totally screwed in our real estate deal. But beyond that, I think he's got other problems.
House inspector that looked at this?
It must be. So that's when you can tell you transitioned into adulthood, by the way, when you watch movies like this and your first thought is not, oh, go save your wife. It's like, holy cow, who did your insulation?
The two things going through my mind at that was that, and then I'm looking at the bathtub and I saw like the water, the fixture that they had on there. I'm like, that's a nice fixture. I'm like, but those are expensive. Those are like easily $1,000 for those old school like faucets like that for a bathtub.
I think that was actually original, like in that house in the 80s. That didn't.
It probably was. It's very like old time chic, and I've looked at that for my bathtub, and I'm like, I'm not spending that much money on one of those, but I'm like, man, they look nice.
Yeah, they look nice, but especially now after seeing this, you're just like, no, I don't want to be reminded.
What happened in the 80s when they just did all these like cheap fixtures in the houses and everything like that? I mean,
it was
some personality.
Get
those
everything looked
fixtures.
Good. Everything looked good, but underneath it was really hollow. It was the 80s. So anyway, he intervenes.
It mirrors our economy, Jay.
It kind of does. But they're having this whole fight, and I love the thing. He gets her in the tub, and this time he's going to finish it. He drowns her, we think, right? I mean, he's got her dead to rights. And, I mean, she's cut him on the chest. It's a pretty violent fight, but he kills her.
She's terrible with a knife, though, man. Where does she learn how to swing that thing? Like, she's using it almost like a hammer or like a baseball bat. She's not doing that stabbing motion like someone like Jason would.
She's a crazy person, and she's not crazy in like the Jason kind of way. She's like,
I thought she killed the wife. The way that they were kind of showing
it does make you think
I thought she got stabbed a half dozen times, but I guess she really didn't get cut.
She does. She stabs her in that cast. That's the thing, is that Beth's cast gets stabbed a lot. You watch it, you see that, but you think that she's dead. That's why you don't see her in the frame, and you wonder where's the wife when he's sitting up out of the tub and catching his breath. And that's when what you don't realize is she's gone to go get the gun that they set up 5 minutes earlier in the drawer, and Glenn Close rises from the watery
That's the biggest
grave.
Chekhov gun moment I think I've ever seen.
It may have
talking on
been.
the phone, and he just happens to open up the drawer to look at the gun. It's like, dude, you knew that was in there. But I guess they
Completely,
needed it for the audience, though.
Well, they had to set something up for the audience. For how do you introduce something like that? We've never seen these.
Well,
people
yeah,
before,
you introduce it by the fact that maybe he buys a gun sometime in the movie because of how crazy she's being or something like that. But like I said, I'm being extremely nitpicky.
They would have never done that because again, the ending this was shot many months later. So they're like, well, we gotta show a gun in the drawer. So maybe he's gotten one since all this has happened. Whatever. The point being is, she rises from the grave or the watery grave and is coming after him and gets shot.
Can that really happen?
I don't know. I mean, my wife laid it out. She said, I think she's faking. I think she fakes that she's drowning so he'll let her go so she can come back. Because she's done this before. I mean, we've seen her like attack him out of nowhere before. They've already set that up. And I was like, maybe she is completely off her, rails at this point, but maybe she's got just enough to go, you know what, I'm just going to lay still for a second, and then he'll never know, and then I'll take him out too, because he deserves to die too. And then she gets shot and she dies, and it's a violent thing. And my wife actually brought up something. She's like, so who's to blame for the dead kid that she's not having now? And I was like, holy cow, I've never thought about that before, but that is kind of messed up, that in one shot all of Dan Gallagher's problems go away.
Well, his wife solved all his problems with one pull of the trigger. But I was like thinking like real cynical here. I'm like, oh my God, what if the kid's bedroom was on the other side and that bullet hit him? I was thinking something like that. Yeah, I was like, what if they're going to totally
that was the other thing that my wife was like, how is the daughter not running down the hall? I'm like, because she probably wasn't there when they shot it. So they just had to go with it. But yeah, that she's conspicuously absent from the end of this movie. But
that's the thing though. I mean, I was going to bring this up with the whole pregnancy thing. Was that really ever validated that she was pregnant?
Yes it was. And here's the one, when he's talking to his lawyer friend, he says, I called the doctor, and the guy says, congratulations. I can't imagine what she told him. So yeah, she really was pregnant. So that is an unresolved bit here, is that Beth not only kills the mistress, but she kills the mistake with the mistress, if you want to say.
No, would you have liked it better if they would have said that it was, that they said that it was fake, that she was just saying that?
I think it would have been well, in some ways it makes you more sympathetic for Dan than that he was really just being played the whole time by this or whatever. But it also removes part of the motivation for the Alex character. I do think that's part of what sends her down the road.
I don't think anything either had to do with her wanting this guy to be the father. I think it was all self-desire for herself. And okay. I think that the pregnancy thing, whether, saying it's true, even if it was fake, I think that was all just kind of another area that she could use against him, or another way that she could try to draw him in, whether, that's like, pregnancy or killing the rabbit or whatever it is. I think they were all tools that she was using to try to obtain what she wanted. I don't think she cared at all about having a kid. I don't think the whole thing about her being 36 or whatever and coming up, her childbearing years are almost over. I don't think that really had anything to do with her motivation with them at all. I think it was just a pawn in her game.
It may have been, and I think you're probably right. I think also it's part of the tragedy of this ending is that this, the consequences of this mistake for him are far-reaching, and who's to say that they make it? I mean, Beth winds up, in his arms at the end, and they go back inside, but who's to say in the aftermath of all of this that she just doesn't go, hey, yeah, I can't do this anymore. I mean, who knows? I mean, either way, his life as he knew it is completely destroyed, and it's destroyed because of a selfish mistake he made. And
I think in a way, maybe they will make it. And I think Glenn Close's character accomplished that with her actions in the end. I think if it would have been something where Glenn Close killed herself and then, she happened to get him out of jail or something, I don't think they would have made it if it would have been that. I would have think that this would have been something that would eat at them and they couldn't be together anymore. I think the fact that it was such a tragedy thing at the end and like this big fight, that I think in a way by him, killing this woman, to protect her, I think in a way that it's going to be something that maybe in a way that's something that brings them together. Or kind of be, and I think we're meant to. But I could see it going both ways, where she's like, yeah, I could just see the arguments in the future, like where they're deciding what movie they want to go see and go, yeah, the last time you made a decision, it tried to come in the bathroom and kill me. So we're going to go see, Shakespeare.
Yeah, and the way you
Love.
handled that was to murder it with a gun. So yeah, I can see that going down now. So, but
Yeah, and
either
she
way,
turn and go, you see my resolve.
I think I would never argue with that woman again. I think we're meant to believe that they do.
I get rid of that gun.
Well, I'll tell you now. I think
shooting
your version is what we're meant to believe because of the way that it closes in on that picture of the three of them: the mother, the wife, the daughter, and the husband. There at the end, the happy family is that through all of this they are together, and then that's the end of it. But I mean, it's a powerful statement. You can look at it a lot of different ways. I think we're at the point of the podcast.
It's open ended. I think you're supposed to just take however you feel about relationships and marriages and stuff and kind of, figure it out your way and stuff if they're going to be together. But that's not the point of the movie, though, is, if they're going to live happily ever after. The whole point of the movie is that a one-time mistake can be a lifetime mistake. And
exactly.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, I'm like, maybe they could do a sequel to this where maybe like she's on life support and the baby matures and the baby grows up and then ends up coming after her father.
That's like The Fly 2 almost. Let's not go there. So thankfully they didn't do that. So we're at the part where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for Fatal Attraction?
I'm going to go with a large popcorn. I actually really enjoyed this movie. Kind of watching bits and pieces of it over the last couple weeks, and actually this morning I did actually sit down and watch the entire thing from front to back, and I really enjoyed it. I'm actually kind of disappointed I've taken this long to see this movie. I think it's a very, I would say it's an important movie as far as the media and shows and movies that have come after it, because they've borrowed so much from this. And I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe this movie borrowed a lot from other stuff, but to me, it's just like there's been so many references and homages and just ripoffs of this movies throughout the last, God, we're almost going on 30 years. Wow. Yeah, it's a strong movie and one that I really think the performances are good. As much as I want to rip on Meryl Streep looking like a witch, I'm glad they cast her in this.
Not Meryl Streep.
Well, not Meryl Streep, Glenn Close. I'm sorry, I get those two confused all the time because they're always not. It's always one of them is nominated for an Oscar. So, yeah, Glenn Close. I think she pulled off the psychotic, crazy ex-lover bit just perfectly, where you completely buy all the lunacy that she does later in the movie. So, and Michael Douglas does a good job, and Archer does a very good job. So, yeah, it's a large popcorn. It's a very, very strong recommend. One that if it's on TV in the future, if it's on Lifetime or, HBO late at night or something, I'll probably just put it on just to watch it again. It's a movie I really enjoyed. So thank you, Jay, for recommending this one.
I'll say I join you in this as a large popcorn, by the way. I think this is a very good film, and there are a lot of different ways to tell this story. I don't know that one has done a better job of telling it than this one throughout the years. It's been parodied, ripped off, used so many different times, but there's nothing like the first one. I don't think. This movie is fantastic and does a really good job of selling itself in all ways. I do think it's a must watch, particularly if you haven't seen it. If you're like Nick and you've missed it and maybe you've just seen pieces of it or whatever, it's one to revisit. It's not one you can watch often. I think it's tough to watch. It's a hard film to swallow and it leaves you with a lot to talk about, but it's something worth watching and talking about. I think there's a lot of different places it could go. And, in the world of recycled Hollywood, I'm kind of surprised this hasn't been, spun around again. And maybe it has, and it's just been called different things. I don't know. I did see somebody told me once that the movie Swim Fan was Fatal Attraction with teenagers, and I'm not really sure that that's accurate because I've seen that film. But we can also do
Fatal Instinct, directed by Carl Reiner.
Yeah, well, let's not get into that. So, but yeah, it's been redone and retold maybe before, but maybe I don't know if you can ever go back to the original and redo it. But I could see this being, one of another show that Netflix wants to do, or limited episodes, something like that. You can make a lot out of this, but for a 2-hour movie, it's very satisfying. So large popcorn for me as well. And that will wrap up our review of Fatal Attraction. Of course, you can find more episodes on our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. Subscribe to Filmstrip on iTunes and drop us a line. Let us know what you think and leave us a review for the show. We appreciate your support. Until next time, for Nick, I'm Jay. Thanks for listening to Filmstrip.
Thank you for listening to Filmstrip. You can find more episodes on our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. Please leave us a positive review on iTunes and link up with us on Facebook. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121.